This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Whether it's your new profession or just a lifelong passion, start your journey to website glory with Squarespace. Check out their awesome all-in-one platform through the link in the description below. More on them in a bit. Space is dangerous. Humans have spent the last several 100,000 years evolving to become the apex predators of the planet. We could survive the harsh cold, the scorching heat, and everywhere in between, but that Darwinian process didn't give us the kind of preparation we'd need to survive in the vacuum of space. Despite the inconceivable difficulties, there was one thing that the hundreds of millennia did give us, which is our ingenuity. Space is not just the final frontier, but also the greatest challenge for us to overcome. Even the gargantuan task of climate change is just one part of the solution required for us to live in space or on other planets long term. With all of that, though, humans have achieved enough that it is truly mind-boggling. From the James Webb and Hubble telescopes to the multiple missions to Mars and, of course, the Apollo program, humans have looked at the stars as a challenge and many times have come out successful. In order to make sure they have a no-failure environment, NASA goes out of its way to make sure that every single eventuality is discussed, covered, and trained up. It is this training that allows astronauts to complete their missions even when the odds are stacked against them. Of the many different techniques devised to prepare astronauts for their extraterrestrial careers, almost none are more ingeniously simple than the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, or NBL. The NBL takes the physics of swimming and buoyancy and utilizes them to simulate the conditions of microgravity that astronauts will experience in space. Although the facility itself is relatively simple, at least in comparison to landing a man on the moon, teams of people work around the clock to make sure that these men and women working in space have the best chance possible to complete their mission successfully and, more importantly, safely. For as long as there have been astronauts, NASA has been trying their best to prepare them for the dangers of space, both known and unknown. In the earliest days, they were simply training them to survive a trip in a rocket and coming back to Earth, so they hired Air Force test pilots with experience in dangerous experimental machines going at incredible speeds and at high gravitational forces. As their missions evolved, they needed more than just someone with the right stuff physically, but they also had to be competent scientists ready to conduct experiments and problem solve in this new environment. However, despite all of these new challenges, one of the core issues was the same. Astronauts absolutely must be able to cope with extreme changes in gravitational force during the course of their missions. The first attempt at training at simulated zero-G was very clever, but had a number of drawbacks. For the Gemini mission, astronauts were sent up in planes on parabolic flight plans. Basically, the plane would fly down at a sharp angle, allowing the passengers inside to fall, simulating the effects of being in microgravity. But this was only achievable for about 30-second stints before the plane would have to arc back up, ending the effect. This meant that their training had to fit into these 30-second bursts. This was deemed far too inefficient, and by 1966 it was determined that a new training method needed to be devised. To get training in an environment that simulated zero-G for extended lengths of time, a simple but brilliant solution was devised. Throw the astronauts in a pool. We certainly don't have the time to get into the intricacies of hydrodynamics today. It's actually considered one of the most difficult branches of the physical sciences, but a person is essentially made to have neutral buoyancy, meaning that they neither sink nor float. The sensation is incredibly similar to that experienced when an astronaut is in microgravity. Also, the extravehicular mobility units, EMUs, were already completely airtight and waterproof in order to withstand the vacuum of space, so they needed little modification to be used in pools, which adds the realism of the training. By early 1967, NASA had finished off the water immersion facility at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. This was the first facility that allowed astronauts to work underwater. At 7.5 meters wide and less than 5 meters deep, it wasn't exactly an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin both trained in this pool for the legendary Apollo 11 mission that saw both men set foot on the moon for the first time. Eventually, though, the WIF's minuscule size started to be a hindrance. Even before Armstrong set foot on the moon, NASA was planning on a larger facility to train astronauts for the Skylab space station. At this point, they moved to the Neutral Buoyancy Simulator in Huntsville, Alabama. At just over 12 meters deep, this allowed for a wider range of training and even saw some collaborative training between astronauts and Russian cosmonauts, but its distance away from mission control and the bulk of other training facilities being in Houston meant that this was not a perfect solution. Yet another facility, the Weightless Environment Training Facility, was built back at Johnson and opened in 1980 in time to start training astronauts for the shuttle program. Though not as large as the neutral buoyancy simulator at only 7.5 meters deep, the convenience of having it near the other training facilities made it the go-to for nearly 20 years. That being said, the neutral buoyancy simulator was still used infrequently through the 90s as a secondary training location. Once again, NASA kept running into the same problem it had been butting up against since 1967. The pool was too damn small. With construction and training for the ISS in full swing, NASA wanted a facility that could house entire sections of the station submerged within it so that the astronauts could train with full analogs of the actual facility in a simulated zero-G environment. At this point, they wanted a future-proof solution that was big enough to handle basically anything that they could throw at it. Alright, we'll get back to today's video in just a second, but first, here's a quick word from our longtime friends over at Squarespace. This is the age of creation. Think about it. Everyone is out there making something. People don't just watch YouTube anymore, they make videos. They don't just listen to podcasts, they record them. They don't just look at websites and blogs, etc. They make them. And if you want to make a website, blog, online store, whatever, you should definitely do it with our friends at Squarespace. Maybe you're a hands-on type of person, you got lots of opinions and ideas about what your site should look like. Well, good news, Squarespace is super customizable. Or maybe like me, you don't have any design skills and you're extremely lazy. Well, then go on to Squarespace, click a template, bada bing, bada boom. It's good to, well, it's not quite good to go. You've got to swap out the stock photos and text. You don't want lorem ipsum on your website. That's just confusing, but it's very easy. I promise you it's very easy. And if you get stuck, which you probably won't, there's tech support. They'll help you out. And once you're done setting up your website, there are tons of extra features: email campaigns, patronage portals, social integrations, member-only areas, analytics, commercial ops, 24/7 customer support, everything you need in one place. So when you're ready to get started on the next web project, big or small, if it involves a website, do it with Squarespace. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch your new site, go to squarespace.com/megaprojects to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. And now, back to today's video. It was decided the Johnson Space Center needed to expand. Among the many reasons given for this decision was the building of the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, which was to be a long-term solution for the issue of training in a simulated zero-G environment. Building on a few miles of land north of the main facility, the foundation for the NBL was laid. It dwarfed all of the previous facilities at 62 meters in length, 31 meters in width, and 12 meters in depth, holding 23.5 million liters of water. Construction started in 1995 and ended in 1997. Unlike most mega projects, this one seems to have come in on time and on budget. That's probably because the construction of this facility, although interesting, wasn't exactly unique. There were hundreds of thousands of pools in Texas alone, and this was hardly different. It was just really a lot bigger. The scale of the pool can be difficult to comprehend at first. Even the floor of the NBR consists of a nearly 2-meter thick concrete slab to keep the floor as even as possible in consistency so that there were no weak points. The entire floor here was poured continuously. That meant they needed 528 concrete trucks to run a meticulous timeline. Being late was not an option, as there could be no pores in the pour or risk having structural damage to the facility if the concrete didn't harden evenly. However, they couldn't be too early either. If the trucks sit around long enough, the concrete inside them will start to set, which not only ruins the concrete, but totals the vehicle. Leave it to NASA to assure that continuously pouring the 4,500 cubic meters of concrete in the floor could be orchestrated without incident, like it was. The walls also required massive amounts of material. Over 1,270 metric tons of metal bars were inserted into the walls with concrete for additional stability. One of the other engineering design choices was to make the walls slightly concave during the building process. Although this may seem counterintuitive, it's because of the incredible weight of the water pushing against the 1.5 meter thick walls. Since they started concave, they were nearly perfectly vertical, with the water adding pressure. Adding the water also was a Herculean task which took nearly a month to complete. For one, the city could only give them a 4-inch diameter hose to fill up the facility, so imagine trying to fill a standard pool with a garden hose and you'll start to get the picture here. Also, an added benefit of this was that it allowed those concave walls a chance to adjust the water so that it would bend but not break against the deluge. However, the NBL isn't just a massive pool. There are bigger pools all over the world, but it is the amount of integrated technology that makes the NBL a world-class training facility. 2 massive overhead cranes are constantly at work, lifting huge 1-to-1 size mock-ups of whatever it is the astronauts need to be training on. The logistics and mock-up facility is charged with the job of making replicas of anything that the astronauts astronauts need to work on during their mission. All of these mock-ups are made in-house near the NBL itself. Since spacewalk time is both dangerous and costly, their missions are carefully choreographed so that missions can be completed with minimal time and risk as well as maximum efficiency, so having these replicas be as accurate as possible is of the highest priority. Maybe the astronauts will be stationed to the ISS. In that case, multiple different sections of the station can be dropped in. Maybe the Hubble telescope needs a quick repair. Well, they've got a spare one to practice on. Maybe it's SpaceX subcontractors working on the Falcon 9 or Dragon capsule. Well, replicas are on hand for whatever it is that they need. There were even full-scale replicas of the space shuttles until the program was retired in 2011. In addition, they have a number of smaller cranes to lift the astronauts in full gear in and out of the pool. Another interesting feature is a full workup of closed-circuit television cameras. Although this was significantly more impressive in 1997 when the NBL was first opened, there are countless cameras around to see everything that the astronauts are doing. They also have suit-mounted cameras that allow them to record as they're working. Just like an athlete will go back and review footage from previous games to try and find areas of improvement, the astronauts and their teams will do the same to try and iron out any issues that they might have, or even find a way to modify a tool to make it easier or more efficient to use in their bulky EMUs. In space, time is money, and small screw-ups can cost millions of dollars. Much more important than the financial implications, though, are the astronauts' lives, and they're literally hanging by a thread during spacewalks, and mistakes can be deadly. Luckily for all involved, practice makes perfect, which is exactly what they're banking on. On top of all that, the water and equipment is very carefully monitored and controlled. There is a clean room facility that disinfects all gear and tools that are taken in and out of the pool. Since contaminants can ruin experiments or make training less accurate, this is a vital part of keeping the NBL as a functional tool. The temperature is always kept between 28 and 31 degrees centigrade to make sure that the team of full-time support divers don't suffer from the effects of hypothermia in the water. The astronauts' EMUs are temperature controlled, so they don't have to worry about that. Also, like most pools, a series of chemicals are added to keep the water sterile, safe, and ready for training at any time. Most impressively of all, the water in the pool is cycled through every 19.6 hours so that the water never stagnates in the pool for too long. Stagnant water can become foggy, which would make much of the training more difficult, so the NBL's water remains crystal clear at all times. Lastly, there are extensive medical facilities on the premises just in case of an accident. Although injuries in the lab are infrequent at worst, they are ready for just about anything that could be thrown at them. There's even a hyperbaric chamber in case anyone on the premises would suffer from decompression sickness. If you want to know more about that, you can check out our video on saturation diving, which covers the topic broadly. The NBL has been used on countless occasions to prepare astronauts for the difficult jobs that are ahead of them. One of the most famous missions is how the NBL was essential in the effort to fix the Hubble telescope, as previously mentioned. As soon as NASA realized that the telescope was not working properly, they devised a plan to remedy it, and the NBL was immediately put into action. The aforementioned full-scale mock-up of the Hubble was lowered into the pool for the astronauts to practice on. Luckily, since the replica of Hubble was designed with the exact specifications of the functional one, replicating the issue that needed to be fixed was already achieved. To demonstrate how extensively the NBL was used for this mission, for every hour of time on a spacewalk, NASA engineers spent 20 hours planning out exactly how this mission should be conducted and what training would best prepare them to have a successful mission. After that, each astronaut participating spends 14 hours in the NBL preparing and practicing that singular hour of work in space. This was a mega project in and of itself. For the Hubble mission training, 2 astronauts and up to 25 people were in the pool at any given time. The support divers watched closely to try and catch anything that could improve mission safety, efficiency, and the likelihood of success. There was also a post-dive meeting after every single dive to debrief on successes and areas of improvement. Largely thanks to the NBL and the extensive training on the mock-up of the Hubble, the mission was completely successful. You can check out our video on the Hubble telescope if you want more details how that incredible piece of engineering went from space junk to one of our most important tools. The NBL can be seen as one of the greatest terrestrial successes of NASA. From a tiny pool hardly large enough to fit the astronauts in to one of the largest and most technologically advanced facilities in the world, neutral buoyancy training has come a long way. At this point, the NBL has operated for nearly a quarter of a century and is still going strong. NASA astronauts, as well as foreign guests and private contractors, all use this incredible facility to turn civilians with the right stuff into the astronauts and explorers that are uncovering the secrets of the universe.